Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Mike Schindler is here. Now, Mike is a U.S. Navy veteran. He's the author of two highly endorsed books, and he's the national podcast host of The Military Wire, which features interviews with some of America's most elite men and women who have served this country. But most importantly, he is the co-executive producer of its VUCA, which is the secret to living in the 21st century. It's a documentary that features 15 of our nation's top experts on how to navigate chaotic times. So we're going to talk to Mike today about all these things: the film business, corporate consulting, discovering your purpose, the rule of five. Who knows what we'll get into? So Mike, glad to be speaking with you.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, Robert. I'm excited to be on your show. So thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It goes both ways. I'm also excited to have you. And so we gave a little bit of an intro, but in your own words, what are you all about? What's your focus? What's your passion? Why should we sit up and pay close attention?
Yeah, well, what am I all about? I'm really, I think I figured out that I'm on the planet to help people understand why they're here. I mean, that's really the bottom line. I mean, I think there's so many people when you look at the mental health issues that are going on, people's anxiety, the uncertainty that's going on, and this whole global geopolitical stuff that's going on, and people are just kind of freaked out. One of the things that, from my military training was really understanding, having clarity on where you're going. And over the years, whether it was from my corporate startup days into what we do in the philanthropic side or even the film side, it's really getting people to understand their story. Why are they here? What are their story? Are they playing a victim in life or are they playing the hero? And really, my job is to help people become heroes, to be honest with you.
I love that. And bad things happen to all of us, but it seems like if
Yep.
you're a victim, that means that, well, it has nothing to do with me and the responsibility is on others and I have no ability to change my situation. And you mentioned about this whole idea of like your military background, and for some reason something pops into my head like 20, 25 years ago, I saw some commercial that was about the reserves, and they were saying something like, you on the weekend you go and do your climbing the walls and crawling through the mud, and then during the week you go to college and go to school. And I guess the angle for that was in like everything else in life is easy compared to the crawling under the razor wire, and you develop
Yeah.
these skills and this focus of saying like, hey, we're not messing around, we have this target, we need to get to this. And then it then applies to the maybe the so-called easier parts of life, like doing the dishes and paying the bill. So that's just what comes to mind when you're mentioning about your military background and then applying it to the all the little civilian features.
Yeah, so it really is. And I'll just speak to men because I'm a man, right? So I don't want to pretend like I can think in my wife's brain, but it really is. Men are so used to historically, like either conquering new territory, building things, developing things, and we've kind of gotten away from that as men in many ways. I'll just say it, Robert. I think many men are soft. And in the military, what you learn is that when you think you've hit the wall, you could probably go 40% more. Does it make sense? So even when you think, man, I can't handle this anymore, really you can. It's just a matter of training your brain to understand that, you know what, I can take one more step. And really what we train people to do is how to take that one more step, how to develop those micro wins. Um, I mean, it's simple stuff like, guys that have problems with, alcohol. It's like, hey, listen, I understand. I'm not going to tell you to stop drinking. I like a good beverage every once in a while. What I'm going to tell you to do is instead of having four beers, why don't you have a glass of water before every beer you have? And before you know it, your four go to two because you're like, man, I got way too much fluid in my system, right? So it's just a matter of taking these micro wins and really understanding how do I become a better me? And when people understand how to become a better me and forget about all the social media stuff and comparing yourself to others, it does not matter. That crap does not matter. What matters is how do you elevate yourself to be the warrior you are? And I believe everybody is a warrior. I don't care if you're a female. I believe that you're here for a reason and you've got a sphere of influence and you can grow that, develop that, but it starts with you. When you look in the mirror, who's looking back? Is it somebody who's a victim, like life is happening to me? Or is it somebody that's like, nah, you know what? Everything that I experience, good and bad, is happening for me, and I'm going to learn through it.
I love that. That's a wonderful message. Micro wins, more reasonable goals, but then when it comes time to push yourself, it doesn't have to be all the time. It doesn't have to be exaggerated. It can be just temporarily for a short burst. And we've all had days like that, right? Where the calendar is just full of appointments, and not every day is like that, but sometimes you do have to put in the 10 hours or the 12 hours. And
Right.
so how do we tap into some of this energy that you're talking about? Because it's like you said, it's so easy to give ourselves these excuses and tell ourselves all these stories. Like, it's so hard. But when it comes crunch time and we have to do the hard things, we have to focus, we have to pursue the risk and the fear. What's the secret?
Well, the secret is starting with the one thing, right? I mean, there's a great book, it's called The One Thing, and it's so spot on. I talk about this like an exercise. Like people are like, Mike, I always want to exercise. And I'm like, well, just start small. Like, just start small. Like, don't sit there and think that you got to be like Lou Ferrigno or, pick, some great bodybuilder like overnight. Like, why don't you just start taking a walk like around the block, right? Every day. Like, every day I'm going to put one thing on. A micro win is really looking at February and go, okay, what's the one thing I can do mentally this month? What's the one thing I can do physically? What's the one thing I can do spiritually? What about my relationship? What about finances? What's the one thing? And just start there. That's a micro win. So we oftentimes go like, okay, I'm going to work out and lose 25 pounds and I'm going to be, this superhero. And then the next day you get up and you're like, yeah, I'm going to start that the next day. Right. So that's what a lot of people do. So it's really just going, no, what's the one thing I can do today? Well, today I'm going to walk down the street. Okay, good. Walk down the street. Hey, you know what? Instead of eating until 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to stop eating at 9 o'clock. Right? Just these are micro wins. People get so fixed on, man, I got to fix it all right now. And they pack too much in. And our brains, especially as men, we can focus on like one thing really well. You start putting a lot of other things in there, right, Robert? Like I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I'm just saying, like, for me, I really have to go, no, you know what? Today, I'm going to be sure that I'm going to drink 3 of these. 3. I'm going to drink 3 of those. I can control that. So what are the things that I can control? When I look at my life, what can I control? Instead of hitting the snooze button, I'm going to count backwards. When that alarm goes off, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, go. That's a neuroscience hack, right? When you start counting backwards, it forces you to do, your brain suddenly goes, okay, well, now I got to go. Well, now, if you don't go, you've made a conscious decision not to, and now you start to feel guilt because you know that you could have controlled that, right? You overrode it, and now you begin to feel like, man, I failed me, right? You're not failing anybody else, you're failing me. And we don't like to fail ourselves, to be honest with you. That's why men struggle. That's why the mental health crisis is over the top, especially with men, is because we've been failing ourselves. And we've been trying to solve all the world's problems when what we really need to do is just look in that mirror and go, how do I improve me just 1% today? How do I do that?
That's very helpful. And what's coming to mind when you're describing this are they're the patterns, basically, right? That the hidden form of self-sabotage is saying, I'm unhappy with this, but then you overcompensate and say, I need to do all this crazy, huge, complex plan in the future. But then it's so huge that I don't even take action. And then I get stuck just back in the safe zone because I'm afraid to fail. And I don't really get the start. But if you just changed a slight bit, then you would see some results and then get excited about it. Like, you hear about the difference between discipline and motivation, right? You wait for
Yeah.
motivation to happen and then say, oh, then I'll get discipline. But if you do a little bit of discipline first and then the motivation kicks in and then there's a little more discipline, then that's a better loop, a better cycle to be in versus the playing it safe type of cycle. And so how does this translate to the change that you're making and the messaging that you're doing? Like, you're doing the business consulting, you're doing the
Yeah.
documentary. So how is your messaging just really expanding and helping others?
Yeah, so it's really, we take that message and we put it into our films or we put it into our trainings. Like, I am really big there's two areas I'm really big on, and that's moonshots. Moonshots, that traces back to the Kennedy era, when the whole world was falling apart. Everybody thought we were going to be at war with Russia. Seems like we're having a repeat, right? There's all these conflicts that are going on. And Kennedy, in his wisdom, said, hey, by the way, I know all this is going on, but we're going to put a man on the moon. We didn't have the technology to do it. We didn't have the know-how to do it. And they're like, well, Mr. President, when are we going to do that? And he's like, hey, we're going to do it in a decade. We're going to do it in this decade. And people are like, oh my God, that's so huge, but let's do it. They got excited, right? We've got to get excited about our lives. And what happens is people get so sucked into social media that they get excited about others' lives, and then they compare and they go, man, my life sucks, as opposed to going, well, what's my own moonshot? Right? Set that moonshot. I don't care what it is. It could be, man, I'm going to be the best dad. I'm going to be the best mom. I'm going to be the best, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be tied to finances. It could be the best you, the version of you. What is that, right? And then how do you get there? Is you break those down into micro wins. Well, what do I need to do each quarter, right? And I have no idea how I gave myself a thumbs up. But anyway, that was a good point.
You did it and it thought to do it, right?
Is that right? So we take that into the film. That's what we did with It's VUCA. We took these experts in the middle of a pandemic. That's when we shot that film. The whole world stopped, and I knew experts were sitting on the sidelines. And I went around and took flights, and we got crews, and we interviewed some of the best people and said, how do we move people from stuck to unstuck using practical, tactical skills that they can control to change their life, right? We're getting ready to do one that's called the Next American Moonshot, the next great American moonshot. And it's all about innovative infrastructure and getting people excited about building things. I mean, think about it, Robert. How did we go from building these amazing cathedrals and buildings to building these, stand-up steel structures that we tear down 20 years later, right? How did we go from that? Like, how did we move into just creating, but we stopped building? And because we stopped building, men don't see that. They don't see that growth, right? We love, us guys are pretty simple, right? We like, right, at times immediate gratification. That's why we mow the lawn. I'm like, hey, I mowed the lawn. I see the grass cut, right? When we build things, we see outcome. And that's where when people, you made a great point. Jocko said this, I got to credit him for saying it, but he said there's discipline, there's freedom in discipline, right? So discipline equals freedom. And if people want to get more of their life back, they've got to be disciplined. And so that's what we teach. So when we go into corporate sectors, we work with their leaders and we tell their leaders, listen, you want to get people motivated? People have to understand the role they play in your story. What's your corporate moonshot? And what role does that person on your team have outside of just sitting at a desk processing paperwork? Right?
Right.
There's a great story, again, Kennedy, where he's visiting NASA. And Robert, he goes and he's touring, and it's pretty amazing. They're building up this infrastructure. It's just pretty incredible. And he sees a guy over there sweeping the floors. And he goes over to the guy and he says, hey, what's your job here at NASA? Right? And it's pretty obvious. He's pushing a broom, right? But he says, what's your job here at NASA? And he says, Mr. President, my job here at NASA is to help put a man on the moon.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
That is what we have to get people to own. Like, I get that your task, your mission might be an accountant. But when I was in the service, I'll just give you a quick example. When I was in the service, I had a chief that said, Mike, let me tell you what your purpose is. Your purpose is to help save the world from bad people.
Cool.
I'm an 18-year-old kid. I'm like, dude, I'm totally into that. That's crazy. I'm in, right? Your mission is commander's intent. Whatever the commander says today, that's your mission. Okay, great. It could change, right? Well, that's fine. The mission could change. Your job could change. The things that you're doing on a daily basis could change. That's your mission, right? Your purpose is something greater. And your identity, my identity was my rank. It was the uniform, the Navy uniform I wore. That was my identity. Now, my identity is tied, okay, to making sure that I help other people improve their lives. My identity is really my faith, right? That's my identity. So my identity, I'm secure in who I am. My mission changes daily because I'm working with different people to help them accomplish different things. That's a great mission. I love it. right? My purpose is to add value to people's lives and to encourage and uplift, right? That's my purpose. And still to help save the world from bad people. But yeah,
Amongst other things. Yes.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's wonderful. And so what I'm getting from you is that I imagine that most people don't ask these sorts of introspective questions, right? They don't ask
they
themselves
don't.
what their moonshot is and what my mission and my purpose is. And it seems like we could all benefit from a little bit of that ego boost, right? You think of like who's the janitor at NASA, or if you're a janitor at Disney or Hershey or Tesla or something, you're playing a small part, but it's a part in this larger whole where you're really accomplishing great things, and it's not just you, but it's part of this teamwork. And then there's also something to tapping into the man's need for something visual, right? Of to see some
Yeah,
kind of some tangibility of, like, like Kennedy didn't just learn about NASA. He went there and like saw everything that they were doing just to be part of it. So these are some interesting questions to ask ourselves: is like, what is our moonshot, and what does that look like? What can I visualize? How can I use my imagination to get there? And so where are people falling short with this? Like, we've talked a lot about how a lot of people don't think in terms of micro wins and this kind of dual strategy, right? If you have the big
yeah.
goal, but then the steps to get there. But when you jump into these businesses and there's like these maybe dysfunctional teams, or they could be working together better, like what are like the hidden problems? Like, where are people messing up that's maybe not being discussed enough?
Well, it's communication and setting the vision. Like a leader's job is to set the vision, right? It's really the moonshot. That's the leader's job, is really to get people in and track people that will help accomplish that moonshot. So I don't care if you're the head of the household or if you're the CEO of a major company, it is the same. Like, why does, what does it mean to be a Schindler? Like, if you were to ask my daughters, what does it mean to be a Schindler? They would know, right? So I would challenge everybody, what does it mean to be you? Like in your family, what does it mean if somebody's got your name, if they're wearing your name on the back of their jersey? What does that mean? What does it mean to be you, right? Start there. It really, it's a basic question, which is, if I were to have my best year, mentally, physically, spiritually, relationally, financially, if I had my best year in those 5 areas, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean to me? Not to everybody else. I don't give a crap what everybody else thinks. It doesn't matter, right? What does it mean to me? And then you set that goal, and then you might need mentors to help you get there, right? I mean, my life changed when I got mentorship. So when you get mentors in your life that help feed you and help grow you and help challenge you and help correct you, right? Suddenly your life changes for the better. Where people fall short is they're just like, I just got to get through today. And they get through the day and they wake up and they go, crap, that's Groundhog's Day. All I have to do is get through today, right? And that's the repeat story, as opposed to going, why am I pulling my head off this pillow? What does it mean to be me? Man, today, you know what? I'm just going to work out I'm just going to do 10 push-ups and 10 sit-ups. That's all I'm going to do. I didn't do it yesterday, but I did it today, and that's a micro win. Oh, I'm going to walk down the street and back. That's a micro win. Oh, you know what? I'm going to tell my family I love them. Never done that before. That's a micro win. Oh, you see what I'm doing here? I'm just going, what are some slight changes? What are things that I can do that put me on the edge of my comfort zone that I've not done before, but help me move the needle in those 5 areas of my life? And if I can position my life so that it helps me move the needle in those 5 areas, okay, then that's a win. Am I always going to be successful doing it? No. Am I going to fall short? 100%. Okay. But guilt and shame have no role in helping you become a better you. You got to let go of that. That's the old story. That's the victim story, right? Let go. I know it's easy, it's easier said than done sometimes, but you've got to let go. That's why mentorship is so key.
This is huge. This is an important conversation for us to have. We need this coach. We need this mentor. We need to come to terms with what we want to be, where we want to go, and get that in writing, because our mind plays tricks on us. So we don't have it in concrete terms. And you're saying that we need to just do a little bit better in some of these areas today. and then that way, then that will become more of the new normal, and then we get a little bit better again, and then just like slowly inch towards where we want to be and where we want to go. So in our last few minutes of our conversation here, Mike, what should we really be thinking about? Like, I mean, we talked about things like the micro wins and the coaching and the mentoring, but as far as like people taking action and finding out about you and your podcast and your services, like what should people do as far as actually implementing this, instead of like learning's important, but we then need to take action. So how do we do it with your help?
Yeah, well, people can visit our website, right? I mean, they could go to It's VUCA. That's our big film. That's our executive leadership company that helps people, work on those things. They can watch the movie. The movie's very inspirational. I mean, now granted, Robert, I'm biased, right?
Sure.
But it is inspirational. I still watch it, not because I'm in it. I watch it because the leaders who are in it, it talks to me at different points in my life, right? We go through these ebbs and flows. Like people get confused about the hero's journey. They're like, hey, once a Jedi, always a Jedi. That's not true, right? Like you're a Jedi, but understand that sometimes you can fall back into imposter syndrome, fall back into being Luke Skywalker, right? I mean, if you want to use a Star Wars analogy. So it really is about, how do I make significant change for me, but do it in small wins, right? Because every day I can make a difference. And listen, I've not been perfect at it. I'll be straight up. Like I went through that whole process, but I'll tell you that I went from my fighting weight of 168 up to 199 pounds when I was shooting that film, because I was behind cameras, I was in front of cameras, I was in editing rooms, I was drinking way too much. So here I am teaching this, coaching this, building this whole program, and then realized, my gosh, I kind of let myself go, right? Because I let everything else, I let the external impact and control my internal, the things that I could control. And I had to wrestle those back. And there will be times in your life that you have to wrestle those back. But if they want to visit us at itsvuca.com, they can do that. If they want to find good mentors, I don't care who the mentor is. If the mentor speaks your language and can help you, it's that person speaks to you, lean in. Like lean in. Like I've got some great mentors in my life. That's a good investment of your time. It's a good investment of your money to do that. It's just really like, if I had my next best year, what does that look like? And is it big enough? Is it a big enough aha moment for you that you're like, listen, I don't want to have to get up at 6, but I'm going to get up at 6 because it's the only time I have to work out.
And you might
And
need that mentor in order to keep you going with those difficulties, right? With the waking up early and with the added stress. That way you're not going it alone.
yeah. And to begin with, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. Like I'll admit, like when I said I started wrestling it back, like I love a good vodka drink. I do. And when I started wrestling it back, Robert, I was like, I was around people that were drinking all the time. And I'm like, oh man, I'll just have one. And then one would turn into two and two would turn into three. And before you know it, I'm like, dang it, I missed my mark. And the first week, it was really hard. It was extremely hard. So, but that is the part that understand that you can do hard things. You can. So who's going to win? Is it going to be your higher self, or is it going to be the self that you're not happy with? Because you're going to let one of them win. So which one are you going to let win?
Higher self, the wolf that you feed.
That's it. 100%. And I love that story. Love
And
that
I
story.
love the stories that you've been telling, especially the militariness of it, of saying like it will be hard, right? Like say a kid goes to boot camp, that's it's not going to walk in the park. Your expectations are that it's going to be hard. And I read something the other day that said like if you get angry, it's because your expectations were not met. So if you know ahead of time that it will be hard and you mentally prepare yourself, and there will be uncertainties, but you say, hey, well, this is something that I know for sure that I will have to rise up and be my better self, then maybe that will cut down slightly on some of the things that usually hold you back, and you can break the cycle and develop these new positive habits. And the next step to doing this, to being tapped into some of this good mindset discussion of having a mentor and micro wins, the first step is to go to itsvuca.com. That's itsvuca.com. And as people are going there, Mike, just to tap into their better selves, do you have any kind of a quote or lesson just to wrap this whole thing up? Does anything come to mind to you to help us with all of these difficulties that men have? Quote or lesson, what comes to mind?
Gosh, a good quote. Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my favorites is "You are your only limit."
Very
I mean,
nice.
I mean that really is. When you look in the mirror, you are the one that's holding you back. Does that make sense? It's the fears, it's the anxiety, it's the story that we've told ourselves. It could be the weights of the past. And the only way that you can overcome those weights of the past, which could be the imposter syndrome of things that you've been failing at, is to have a pull of the future, a moonshot that's so much bigger than that, that you're like, I'm letting go of those and I'm going toward that. So you really are your only limit. Okay. So know what that is. Like, what am I pursuing? And when I look in the mirror, I ask myself, and I do tell myself, and this, I can't remember who originally said this, but they'd wake up in the morning and go, "Man, beautiful, it's good to see you this morning," right? And I do tell myself, I look in the mirror and I'm like, "Hey, good morning, handsome. It's good to see you. Let's rock this thing," and that sets the tone for me, right? Now, it doesn't mean, Robert, that I don't go through the day and go, "Man, that's crap." But when I say that's crap, I also go, "So what can I learn from this moment?" That's what I fall back on. Not, I'm a victim. I might not like it. Okay. I can't control that. There will be things in my life that happen that I can't control. But what I can do is say, what can I learn from it?
They call that positive self-talk. Well, very nice advice. And as we're pursuing our moonshot and figuring these things out, we need to go to itsvuca.com. So, Mike Schindler, U.S. Navy veteran, wonderful speaking with you.
Yeah, great speaking with you, Robert. Thank you.